mindre spagint. Your hunger hunderer skal drentor. Regnum strøm nor eier vasist.
Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So if you guys have seen on stream, I have managed to get a Proto Fist build actually working. It's moderately tanky too. So this is hitting at about 11 mil at level 94, sorry. And basically, yeah, 135,000 effective hit pool, and yeah, we're basically using max block. We get spell suppression from Defiance Banner. And this is using the old Doryani's prototype configuration, which negative lightning stacks, right? And the way that this works is based on Doryani's prototype. Nearby enemies have lightning resistance equal to yours, and what happens is your armor then compensates for lightning damage taken. And then we use negative lightning resistance rings, which now drop in Calandra again. You can also use Aventor's Gamble if you want to do that too, if you want more magic find and mana efficiency, reservation efficiency. But yeah, basically, yeah, we do negative 200% lightning res, and that shows up as a really weird stat on our tree or on our configuration as well. And I've managed to get this sitting at about 32,000 up to 55,000 armor as well, based on flasking and everything else. We'll just chuck on my Onslaught flask, which is what I use when I'm sort of running around. So yeah, overall the build is pretty okay. It's not by any measure the best build in the game, right? I'm using this to basically just blast Maven encounter maps, and so my tree is basically this here. So I think I had it as this, yeah, or we changed it since to this here, but originally I had like Maven as my farm ability, but basically, all I've been doing is smashing map bosses, taking down, you know, Maven and power bosses, and then selling Maven chisels and stuff like that, which has sort of been okay. It's not the most profitable approach, but I've been making okay currency to fund everything in the build. Now, the key item that makes this build work, you'll notice there is no weapon. And when you do play it, if you choose to play it, you need to also make sure that under game you've got auto-equip switched off, otherwise you'll keep equipping weapons as you pick them up. Is the Doryani's fist, right? That's how this works fundamentally. So what this gives you is it gives you Doryani's touch, and so you don't have to have this linked. I have it linked because I just wanted to, but basically then you just chuck in the gems to boost it up, and Bob's your uncle, it pretty much works. Now, the other thing that I did manage to build into the build was it does cost quite a bit to run this skill, like 36 mana. So we actually use Devouring Diadem, and Devouring Diadem in combination with Doryani's here has 206 energy shield gained on killing a shocked enemy, and we sit about 30 to 50% shock on enemies all the time. So basically, yeah, we're always killing shocked enemies, so you can basically just like one hit entire screens. As you can see, the AOE is pretty big, and when we get more AOE off of our auto exertion set up with Seismic Cry. And the other thing that manages to get us power charges is we actually use our Battle Mage's Cry with auto exertion to then trigger Orb of Storms, which then has power charge on critical strike. So we get guaranteed power charges on fighting bosses, which gets our crit up to about 78.69%. So it hits pretty hard. The other piece of the mechanic that you need to understand is you cannot get crit into this build unless you use Ridgewald's Curse. So it's very similar to a Facebreaker setup. When it says modifiers to claw damage also apply to unarmed. Now, I'm not specifically leveling up crit based on claw like modifiers to claw crit, right? Global modifiers like global crit apply to claw damage, which then applies to unarmed damage indirectly, right? So that's how this manages to get up on the crit scale, if you are wondering. Now, as far as DPS goes, mine sits at probably the highest DPS I've seen of the few players playing this on a ladder, and definitely I have a bit more tankiness here, so max block, or, you know, versatile combatant max block with like overcapped reses, and then yeah, a fair bit of avoidance and everything else that I have built into this build, so it sort of hits on there, and it's pretty tanky. I got like you know, nearly 60,000 armor on this, which is pretty good to mitigate lightning damage. Now, things like Mana Siphon, you're going to instantly die to. I have no solution for Mana Siphon. This build is just inherently weak to it. Lightning Dot as well. It's not great against Lightning Dot, and it's not good against things like Chaos Floor Dot. Ground Dot's a big pain in the butt for this build. And yeah, Shaper and whatnot, not fantastic for face tanking Shapers. But outside of those few things, it's pretty good. I've taken it down to 350 depth delve. I've been using it to basically just blast maps and make a ton of gold in maps. So I think I've got my city pumped up with like 1 mil of gold, something like that, from just like map blasting. Outside of that, like, it's okay in boss fights. It can do 350 depth boss fights. I haven't tried it on a Crystal King, but I'm confident it could take about a 300, 350 depth Crystal King without any crazy modifiers. Now and again, yeah, it has some weird, like, one-off deaths and whatnot. It's probably tankier than a lot of slam builds out there, but, yeah, it's definitely not the tankiest build that I've ever played. It's moderately fast. We do stack blitz charges on it as well, so we use blitz on the ascendancy. And the other thing we do is we stack a bit of rage on it too. And I did play around with rage. So we'll eventually get battle trance, which is in the tree. So we get up to 40 rage in the tree. Currently, this setup in the footage is like about 8.3 or 8.4 mil. So it'll actually hit harder, like to the point where it'll almost one-hit stuff. Yeah, overall, it's just a fun build. Like, it's cool that this now works and we can play it. So I thought I'd make it. If you were to do things like tack a mage blood into this and... you know, corrupted helm, better shield, implicit's better, a better amulet, for example, a better proto fist if you can. I think this was a max roll on the proto fist. No, it's a pretty good roll, but it's not max roll. But yeah, there's tons of upgrades you could put into this build to make it a lot better. The other thing too is I don't run so many auras in the build. I mainly run a lot of my Warcry auto exertion sort of reservations. And then our major aura that you will need in the build will be Determination. If you don't run it with Determination, you're just going to die every time you go up against Lightning. The reason why I put a Baran encounter is it can fight Lightning counter bosses. So basically, Baran and a few others that are out there, the Elder Slayer boss as well, it can fight those bosses without too many concerns. And I have done Cyrus with it and stuff like that. I did take Shaper down with it and everything. It's not at a stage where it could take Ubers. But arguably, you put more investment into anything, you probably could get it there. And it is void of 1 Awakened Jewel as well. So I got a 2120. But if you chuck that in, it'll actually go up. And in fact, if we did that in the PoB... Where is it? So we could do that. It'll probably go up to like, what? 11.3 mil DPS. So it's pretty decent. It's not the biggest DPS, but yeah. Anyway. Let's get into the config on the tree. I'll explain everything and let's talk about the build and how it's all broken down and all the gearing, and we'll go from there. Okay, so configurations. So I don't have the major gods in here. I do use Brian King and I do use Tukahama, so take with that, do with that what you will. Power charges come from our setup on our chest as explained. So basically we proc Orb of Storms with power charge on critical strike, and there's a 58% chance of that triggering, and that's based on our auto exertion with Battle Mage's Cry. And the way the Battle Mage's Cry is, it basically auto triggers whatever spells are attached to it, so it's actually really useful for a large number of builds. You could use it in strike builds too. And then basically from there we have Frenzy charges, which comes from Blood Rage. Endurance charges we generate from, you know, Inexorable from memory. Yeah, Inexorable, as someone pulled me up, and we also can generate it from aggressive Bastion, so they're pretty sustainable as well. Blitz charges are built into the Ascendancy, so that's just in the Zerker Ascendancy called Blitz. I really like Blitz, that gets your attack speed up. Rage, we get 40 Rage, you have a base default of 30 Rage, and we have Rage on hit, so we get Rage on hit here. And then we get Battle Trance, which gets us more Rage on hit. So we get up to 30 Rage at the end of the day. Fortification, we actually get from putting tattoos in the tree. So I have 2 tattoos here for Tukahama Warrior. All you need is 2 with a 10% chance, and it's pretty much up all the time. Onslaught I do have in the build, and it's based on my Silver Flask as well. We don't have any Adrenaline or anything like that. We generally have crit, like we got nearly 80% crit, so we're always critting. Have you blocked? It's max block, so very likely yes. Doesn't really do anything major, just decreases your DPS slightly actually. Enemies on full life, the reason why this is significant is because we have this node here, 150% increased crit strike chance against enemies that are on full life. So on bosses, this does taper out, so it's not as good on bosses. Brittle ground we have coming from the boots that we run in the build. So we have the implicit for brittle on our greaves here. So we have this implicit here. And then basically shock, yes, we apply shock using Doryani's, and we usually sit at like 30 to 50%. So if we go 30%, it's 9.9 mil. So we'll put on average, we'll just leave it at 30%, but you generally shock up to 50%, I've noticed on the tooltip. Blood and Sand Stance, the difference is more damage versus AOE at the end of the day. Obviously, you switch between the two depending on what you're doing. And the banner skill we use is Defiance banner, and the reason why is it gives us like 53% spell suppression. If we don't have that, we have no spell suppression. It's really useful when you're versing bosses and when you're delving with this build. Obviously, this is Guardian and Pinnacle boss damage as well, which is the running standard. Okay, so for gearing, so basically we use a devouring item, and we want the dexterity and intelligence roll on this. The reason why we do this is so we can sustain all of our cast costs, so that basically pulls our ES over into our mana pool, so we can reserve down to as much mana as we can, and run all of our auras. The other advantage is it also gives us 25% increased reservation efficiency for whatever you socket in it. Now I use Determination, Blood and Sand, Vitality, and I don't even use the last socket because I don't need to, but it's really useful. Ridgewald's Curse, we need this to be able to proc crits with Doryani's Fist. If you don't use this, you won't be able to proc crits, so it's a huge source of damage and why my build in particular does so much damage. Now, rings. Negative lightning resistance rings are really useful. You can have a Doryani's ring, at least in one socket, and then whatever roll on your negative lightning resistance rings. These are really cheap depending on the roll that you get. I just lucked out and got some pretty good rolls. You want to look for negative points that go with the negative resistance that are relevant to your build, like maximum mana, evasion, and ES is not a problem, so those negative stats have no gearing, and the negative rarity I've offset based on the rarity of my boots, so impact is nil. Now, the chest piece you need is Doryani's Prototype, and this basically means that your armor applies to lightning damage taken from hits moving forwards, but it does not apply to lightning dot. And then your lightning resistance, because you're negative stacking with your rings, applies to all the enemies around you, which is why this build does, over 10 million DPS. So really easy. It's actually really cheap to get, and I just 6-linked my own because I could. They're like 4 div if you were to buy them outright, more or less. Now, I played around with a lot of shields, including like the Savalan, which looks really cool, but it's not as useful as you think it might be. I ended up just resorting to using a rare shield with a huge amount of armor and resistances. Also note, you need no gear with lightning res in this whole build. You only need fire and cold res. That's it. So basically you want to focus on fire and cold res on the shield, armor, life, and my nose itches every time I make a video, and any elemental avoidance or crit reduction that you can find. Now, the main item in the build is Doryani's Fist. Obviously, I've explained at the very start. This is what gives you Doryani's Fist. So yeah, and then basically you don't need a 6-link here realistically. You just need to link up the fist with the jewels that you want, and we'll go through that, or the gems that you want, and we'll go through that soon. I do have Stygian Vise with a lot of regeneration. These cost like 2 to 3 div. And then just, added lightning to claw. Now you want to basically proc up claw attacks and taunt and any other stats that might give you defense and stuff like that. And then finally, boots. The implicits I have is Searing Exarch drops Brittle, and Eater of Worlds attacks exerted by a Seismic Cry, which I have in my 6-link set up under auto exertion, do 22% increased damage. Aside from that, Cold, Chaos, and Fire Res, a lot of life and movement speed, and 100% chance to avoid being chilled. And then I've got a Basalt Flask, Silver Flask, Granite Flask, Diamond Flask, and a Ruby Flask. In my main setup, you probably could get rid of the Ruby Flask though, and put in anything else. And if you could fit a Progenesis into this would be even better. Okay, so gem setups. So in the helm, I'm running Blood and Sand, Determination, Vitality, and Frostblink, and my Determination is only level 7. and that's deliberate, so I don't cap out my mana and then it drops off and I have a bit more regeneration than not having it. In my shield, I have Automation, Molten Shell, and Blood Rage. So basically this build is just like hit one button and just switch between your stances. Everything else is automated. And then in my chest, I have Intimidating Cry, Seismic Cry, Orb of Storms, Power Charger on Critical, Battle Mage's Cry, and Auto Exertion. So this is where a lot of our reservation is taken up in the build. And this gets us our Power Charges and our big hits for when it procs. Then in the gloves, I've got increased critical damage support, Awaken added lightning damage, and then I've also got elemental damage with attack supports. You could have Awakened on this as well. That's going to give you like 3 to 400k more DPS. And then Pulverize gives you big AOE. You could switch this out for Fist of War. I did try Multi-Strike. The reason why Multi-Strike is not good is because it doesn't proc your War Cries. So if you're going to run Multi-Strike, you got to remove the War Cries. You can get it over 10 mil, it'll hit faster, but it won't have as big of AoE, and I preferred having a bigger AoE so I could off-screen crap instead of taking a lot more risk. Outside of that, in the boots, we've just got Shield Crush, Assassin's Mark, Defiance Banner, and Mark on Hit support as our last gemling. Okay, so for the tree, we come down basically on the life masteries here for the Marauder. We want to pick up Born to Fight, Heart of the Warrior, Versatility, and Warrior's Blood. In here, we do have 2 tattoos of Tukahama Warrior. This is giving us our Fortify down into Wall of Steel so we can cap out our block. Then we get Unwavering Stance all the way across into Master of the Arena, Defiance, and Art of the Gladiator. We come down, we need these 2 nodes here because we're not very dexterous and our character's a little dumb, so we need both of Hard Knocks and Proficiency. Then we come down, we get Strength, we get Champion of the Cause, we get Dismembering, and then Crit Strikes at 150% if enemies are on full life. We need Versatile Combatant, Inner Golem's Blood, Cloth and Chain. We want every 4 seconds regenerate life equal to 1% of armor. Then down into Tetsudo and Retaliation. When you get another point, you want to take the 2% increased attack damage per 75 armor. That's going to give you about 980,000 additional damage. We'll talk about the clusters last. Then we come up and we grab Bloodless. I do have some melee damage tattoos in here too, so just keep that in mind when you're doing the build. Then we grab As the Mountain. We get 1% of spell block damage per 5% of attack block on our shield. This caps our spell block out to 65%, which makes us a little tankier. Then we want Inexorable. Then our Anoint is Aggressive Bastion, as noted. Then we have Juggernaut. Then we want Brute Force Solution. The reason why we need Brute Force Solution in here, if you could get a good Corrupt on this, that's even better, is because we don't have enough intelligence in the build and we got to compensate for that. And this is the, pardon me, sorry, itchy nose. This is the easiest way. This converts all these strength nodes into intelligence, and that means that we can run this build without having to stack insane amounts of intelligence. So this gets us over the line. Without this, we basically can't get the build running because we're basically stacking lightning damage and an intelligence skill on a Zerker. Then we want to come up and grab Barbarism. This is going to give us life and fire res and overcapping. Then we want to come and grab Disemboweling. So we come and get this 12% melee crit strike multiplier point. You could take the increased crit strike chance as well, which is going to probably be a preference now considering we're starved for points. And then basically you want to take the multi against unique enemies. And then finally you want Battle Trance and you want this node up here. And let's talk about clusters. So first one is Thunderstruck, and we want Doryani's Lesson. This gives us Leech and Knockback, Crit, Lightning damage. We do have Forbidden Flesh and Flame in here. It's unyielding. These are 1 div each, and the reason why is we get 6% increased AoE for every single endurance charge we have, which gives us 6 plus 12, 18% increased AoE, which is why I hit so big, and that gives us increased damage per endurance charge. So if you wanted to endurance charge stack, you could, and this would do even more damage and even more AoE. And then we also have Assert Dominance and Towering Threat. This was expensive for some reason, and this gives us 25% AoE if we've killed 5 enemies recently, and also 10% increased AoE, because this build's very AoE-centric. And then basically we come down, and we want to get Heavy Hitter, we want to get Devastator, so I do have a chance for 15% chance to explode with enemies doing 1/10 of their damage as physical damage when I kill enemies, so I have even more clear. And then Calamitous. Now, if you could take Calamitous, this is a mill up. If you got the level 96, this would be a good point to take. This will get you up to about 12 to 13 million DPS. Then we run Quick Getaway, Basics of Pain. just a crit duel with fire and cold res and whatnot, and then also basics of pain and precise retaliation. This is a pretty significant damage buff, and then we run a corrupted blood duel just to give us some other basic stats. Finally, for the ascendancies, we basically run Flawless Savagery, Aspect of Carnage, Crave the Slaughter, and Blitz. Now, I did get Aspect of Carnage first, then Flawless Savagery, then Blitz, and then Crave the Slaughter last. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the build. Like, I'm probably not going to pursue this any further because I want to do an AFK build because these melee builds are hurting my hands a lot and I'm old. But yeah, if you like this video, don't forget to like and sub. All the links will be in the description for the PoB and everything that you need, and feel free to ask questions in the comments. But yeah, until next time, enjoy playing Doryani's Fist for the first time in many, many leagues, and I will see you guys later.